with these 13-day cycles in this procedure, you don't do what's called a scatter plot. You take the least squares linear regression trend on the scatter plot. It's a relatively well-known statistical technique, which he's done perfectly. I've checked as far as I could see one or two of the numbers they look all right to me. So, that means that what we're looking at is a climate sensitivity, as it is called, of 0.5 to 0.8 Celsius for a doubling of CO2. Now that's entirely harmless. The UN says you've got 2 CO2, possibly even 3, and actually get better crop yields, generally better measurements on the whole. There's a whole thing in the relevant chapter. Yes, yes. Oh yes, of course, if you warm the planet you'll get better crop yields. In fact, if we warm it enough and we melt Siberia, we've got vast acres of new agricultural land. But
not in Australia we won't. Not in Australia we won't.
But nobody's advocating that. Sorry? Well, as I said, there's so little in the atmosphere anyway, that even if a lot of it got out into the atmosphere, it would very swiftly decompose. It always does. Yes, well, it means that we did the sum on that before, and it is pretty much irrelevant. Even if you double it, remember we doubled the entire concentration, it still didn't really amount to a row of beans. It amounted to what, 1/6 of a Celsius degree, I think we calculated. That's how it's done, by calculation. So well, what you have to do is you have to calculate on the basis of the most important gases, and there are only 2 that really make any difference. One is water vapor, and that's the biggest of the lot. And the other, well, that's all quite well known, because precipitation, of course, is merely a transfer of latent heat from one place to another, as is evaporation. They net each other off. That's fairly elementary. And likewise, you get convection up and subsidence down, and that's merely a redistribution. Water vapor is the most important thing that has a sheer quantity.
To raise the temperature?
Yes, it will, and that means that in general you will get less in the way of droughts, which in general is probably a good thing. The marvellous thing about a warming of the planet, and this is again settled science, you'll find in the IPCC's document, is that the difference between extremes of cold and heat will diminish. And this is very well observed, and we know this is the case. Now, it is the difference between the extremes of cold and heat which generate winds and hurricanes and storms. So one of the things that you would expect, if you get this difference, so if you get less difference between cold and heat, then you get less storminess. And this is settled science, less storminess outside the tropics. Inside the tropics, it's still an open question for reasons which don't have to do with just that. Other elements come into play in the tropics. However, as far as I can see from the trend in the literature, it's moving towards the understanding that in the tropics we would either expect no change, or if anything, perhaps a decline in hurricane activity around the world as the world warms.
A decline in hurricanes?
Yes.
That's the opposite of what science is designed for.
Well, it's very interesting. I had this out with Tom Carl, who's the director of the National Climatic Data Centre, who takes your view on this, I'll be quite frank about that. And this was in front of Congress just 6 months ago. And he said to me he was very surprised that I had produced data showing that overall hurricane activity was at its lowest at that time in about 30 years around the world. He said, well, this is not true at all. He said, don't you realise we've had a terrific increase in landfalling United States hurricanes? I said, actually, you haven't. The whole western seaboard. I said, you had eastern seaboard. I said, so you had, in fact, no trend, as far as I remember, in the last 100 years. He said, oh, no, it's been much worse than that. So I made him get out his chart. And he had a chart going back 150 years, which is better than mine, and it showed no trend in 150 years in landfalling hurricanes. So then he said, but look at the less than hurricane storms. Look how they've increased in the last 30 years. I said, yeah, and what happened then? A change in the method of measurement. You can now measure those storms with satellites, which you couldn't before because there weren't any. And so all you've got there is an artifact, and you know this perfectly well, of the change in the method of... Where did he get that assumption?
Where did you get that?
Well, because I happen to know the satellites went up 30 years ago, because I get the data off them. So it wasn't an assumption, it was a fact. And he had to admit in front of Congress that I was right. So we don't have a problem with extra storminess as a result of global warming. It would be cooling that would cause extra storminess, not warming.
Lord Crystal Monckton. I've just got a quick question.
Sorry, no, I'm not talking.
Is it all right
I'm
if I
talking to this
speak?
lady. No, talking to this lady here. No,
Let's just discuss
no.
this later.
Sorry. Do you have any further
Yeah,
questions?
like higher temperatures are widely correlated with more precipitation, increasing sea temperature, and
If you get warmer weather, you will get more water vapor, you will get more clouds, you will get more precipitation, you will also get more evaporation, and you will get, therefore, all sorts of compensating factors. And the only thing you need to know is that more rain on the whole is better than less. What you won't get is increases in sudden flooding or storminess of that kind, because those things, of course, have always happened, but they won't happen any more than they did in the past, just because you warm the planet by the really very small amount that we now might be able to warm it by.
what about the warming that's already occurred as well?
Well, let's see when that began. It began in 1695, and we have, for instance, the Central England temperature record, which shows this quite clearly, the first instrumental temperature record in the world. You go from 1695 to 1735. That's a period of 40 years. Before the Industrial Revolution began, on any view, humankind could not have had any significant impact on the temperature changes in that region at that time. The temperature rose by 2.2 Celsius degrees in 40 years. That's an equivalent of 6.5 Celsius degrees a century. And the warming of the whole of the 20th century after human was not. No, I'm not. I'm talking of 1695 to 1735, a period of just 40 years in recent history, just 300 years ago, when temperatures in central England, which are a very good proxy, as we now know, for temperatures in England as a whole, and not too bad a proxy for temperatures around the world, went up by 2.2 Celsius. Nothing to do with us. We couldn't have had any impact. However, in the whole of the 20th century, the temperature increase was 19.
Lord Monckton? Okay, thank you.
The data point we have was 0.6 Celsius. 0.6. That's all in 100 years. During only 20 could we have had any significant impact, even in theory. So what we're looking at is a long-running warming trend for a reason we know well. That is the recovery of the activity of the sun after the Maunder minimum, 1645 to 1715. So that recovery. Oh yes, that is the notorious hockey stick graph related to Earth. 1695. Yes, you can see it there. To 1745. There it goes.
So how many degrees did you just say that
I said
was?
it was 2.2
So
Celsius. Yeah, I know. This is, of course, I think this is heavily influenced by the work of Michael Mann at Penn State University.
Oh, that's convenient. Yeah.
And, well, I mean, it does happen to be his graph, so I would be not at all surprised to find that. And there are a number of other people's graphs there which are
But you
connected to
basically
him.
believe only your own data, is that right?
Well, what I'm saying is this, that if we're talking about the medieval warm period, what is the consensus in the literature? You tell me.
Well, here's the graph here.
Right. The consensus in the literature is as follows. There have been, in the last 25 years, 770 scientists, and I could on notice produce a list of them, who have contributed to papers in the peer-reviewed scientific literature, 400 institutions in more than 40 countries, providing data showing that the medieval warm period was real, was global, and was warmer than the present. That is the
Why was
consensus.
it called the medieval ages? What about the plague?
Well, what about the plague? That was the consensus in the literature as to the medieval warm
Do you want that to happen again?
when the UN says that, we'll come on to plagues in a moment, when the UN says that it represents a consensus, and it then produced graphs not unlike the one we've just seen, not unlike the one we've just seen, then it is not in fact representing the consensus as it is in literature. It's representing a very small selection of papers
Who
written
are
by
you
a closely
representing?
connected.
Can I ask which bodies are funding you?
I'm
Who are
not
you
funded at
sponsored
all.
by?
I make my own living, thank you very much.
Doing
And
what?
I'm here because I want to be
Being
here.
a skeptic?
No, I'm of course every scientist is skeptic, because
So you've got your own backing.
So I make my own living. I have my own little estate in Scotland that generates a nice little income. And no, I don't. It happens. I've never received. I mean, I can give you my address, and if you can tell ExxonMobil to send me a check, I'll be very grateful. They never have yet.
Do you advocate we just do nothing? Is that right?
No, what I advocate is this: that what I've been doing in this conversation with this very good young lady who's been raising a number of interesting points, which we've talked through, is to try to suggest to your minds the possibility that the science is a very interesting subject, which is worthy of study, and that we're not dealing with a belief system. You know, everything I've told you is not what I believe, and nor should you, in any sense, believe a word I tell you, because science isn't done by that. It's done by checks.
When I choose to believe certain people's data sets.
When I say to you that, for instance, there are 770 scientists who have contributed to papers over the last 25 years saying there was a medieval warm period and providing evidence of it, I can, on notice, if you wanted to pursue it, produce the list of all 170
Yeah, I want to see the data, I want to see the
all the
responses,
papers, and you can have a look, and you can have a look, and then you can have a look at the much smaller number of papers, all written by people linked to Michael Mann at Penn State University, all using similar computer model methods, rather than going and getting the source data from sediments or stalactites or ice cores or whatever, and they're all linked, and the report which actually looked at this with 3 statisticians acting for the US Congress did this in 2005,
It's not
I
just
think.
linked to one person. There's many different universities and institutions around the world.
This particular notion that there was no medieval warm period stems from one person, and all the others who are saying the same are linked to him by previous co-authorship. And this study was done by 3 statisticians acting for the US Congress 3 years ago. So we've been watching this guy for some time. We know what his links are. The police are actually circling. It won't be long before I think fraud prosecutions are going to arise. Because the way... No, I mean, as I say, I've had 2 professors asking me to make police reports exactly on this material.
Only 2.
So yes, because they were 2 people who saw these climate change emails, saw that they were named, and one of them was named 70 times. And he was so angry to see what they'd been doing behind his back.
Exactly. So it was a personal anger that caused it. They were personally angry that they'd been offended by this. It wasn't about the
Put your name, I took some press for it, just put your name.
Yeah, my name is Monckton, M-O-N-C-K-T-O-N.
Okay,
I won't write it, but just M-O-N, you can write it, M-O-N-C-K-T-O-N.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's on the thing there.
From a psychoscience, isn't it obvious that if we look at